Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're good and well. Hope you're sitting comfortably too, because I'm about to share with you 10 moments from films over the years that have scared me or disturbed me. So it could be one or the other. I guess being scared is a little different to being disturbed, in the sense, to me, being scared is kind of a bit more immediate. Something's more immediate and it is kind of scary straight away, whereas something that disturbs you is something that settles a bit more into your mind and makes you think on it a bit more. And all 10 of these moments, I think it's an interesting mix of stuff. There's some very recognizable moments that you might immediately recognize. There's, a few classic scenes on this list and a few classic films as well, if I can say that. And what I'll do after sharing each moment with you is share also whether these scenes still unsettle me at this point in my life as a 37-year-old guy. So let's start with the first scene, and it's a genuine, absolute classic from the classic film Jaws. And the scene is Alex Kintner being killed by Jaws in the shallow waters. And this is a scene which still does unsettle me now, and I'll explain perhaps why. But, there's so much build-up in this scene and suspense. And there's a few false alarms as well. I just think it's just genius the way this film was directed. Sorry, this scene in particular, but the film itself as well. And when you actually see the moment happening, it was almost, for me, when I remember first seeing it, a little bit unexpected because of those false alarm moments. And I was a lot younger when I first saw this film. But the thing that really gets to me, and still gets to me to this day, is when the mum comes out from the crowds and realizes that her son is probably the victim of this awful shark attack. And that still does unsettle me. So the first moment on this list is one that still gets to me a bit to this day, from Jaws, right? A total classic. Next on the list is perhaps a more unexpected one. And this one doesn't really bother me anymore, to be honest. This is from the film Ghost. So it is a romance, a kind of gushy film, of course, with the late Patrick Swayze in his element, I think, in this film, with Demi Moore as well. And everyone thinks of the love scenes in this film, right? Or the scenes that are really sad, the tearjerker scenes. I don't really think of those scenes when I'm thinking of this, or rather, this is the scene that, slightly unsettled me. When I was a lot younger, I must have been 11 or 12. And it's those shadowy demons when the villains, right? So it's the villains, and of course, when you're watching this film, you think, yeah, they deserve it, right? But it's the appearance of these shadowy demons and the noise they make that kind of unsettled me as when I was a lot younger. And I don't know what it was, but there was something very unsettling about that sound that they were making when they appear on screen. And I think it's particularly the first time, the scene when it's Willy. Is his name Willy? I don't know if I've not got that wrong. I think it's Willy. Is taken away by them. And I would say it doesn't unsettle me so much. The noise is a little bit disturbing though. And yeah, that's my second moment. Next up, we have The Descent, a film I picked, I think, as my number one from my top 10 films of the 2000s. Horror films of the 2000s, sorry, just horror. But this first attack by the crawlers is the scene I'm talking about, and particularly what happens to Holly is kind of really that unsettles me, and perhaps still just a touch. Now I know what's happening, so it doesn't scare me as much now or anything, or disturb me. But it's when you see her pupils, I think, shrink, or the pupil in one of her eyes shrinks, and it just, first time I saw that, I was like, oh, that's you don't see that. I thought that was a really clever way of depicting somebody's last moments. And brilliant scene all round. Pretty terrifying stuff for your first viewing. Not so much now for me, as I say, but great scene. Next up, we have Jurassic Park. So on to Spielberg once again, and this is the Dilophosaurus attack on Dennis Nedry, who I guess wasn't a particularly likable character, if I remember rightly, from Jurassic Park. But what happens to him is pretty horrible, with the appearance of the Dilophosaurus and the black stuff going over his face, and then him being eaten, or something like that. That was when you're watching that and you're about 8 years old, that's quite a scary little scene. Does it scare me now? No, not really. But yeah. Now, next up, we have a bit of a left field choice. I guess that was a left field choice, Jurassic Park, but now I'm going into Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from 1971. Not the more recent one with Johnny Depp. This is the one with Gene Wilder. And this is what happens to Augustus Gloop when he falls into that river of chocolate, right? And he's sucked up into that tube and he gets stuck and all the people are shouting at him. And you know, it's kind of comical to watch those scenes with what happens to the kids a little bit. But it's as creepy and disturbing as it is comical. And they've got the balance perfect in this film. I'm not sure if this kind of film would now kind of make it to screen just because it, you know, I don't know, or at least, you know, maybe it would, but it wouldn't be sort of a family type movie so much. I don't know. But that scene in particular, seeing that as a kid, did unsettle me. I mean, now I find it like you can see the comical elements better as an adult, I think. I would throw in maybe Violet Beauregarde to this too, perhaps, but I'm going to say Augustus Gloop was the one that used to just a little bit more kind of, just found that a bit freaky, a bit weird to watch that as a kid. Next up is kind of a gross moment, really, but it did unsettle. Since I'm including disturbing moments, I think this can be included. It's the scene from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and it's when the little eels, what are they called? The eels, the little bugs crawl into the ears of Chekhov and the other guy. Just horrible, gross, just gross. And I used to kind of, I used to imagine that happening to me in my sleep, and it used to freak me out, prevent me from sleeping a couple of times, I think, when I was a kid. But not a super scary moment, but one that was disturbing a bit. So does that still disturb me now? A tiny bit, maybe. A tiny bit. You know, we're all a bit worried when we go to sleep with things crawling into our ears. Perhaps that's even, you know, since the days we were all, crawling around outside, and when we were, from an evolutionary standpoint, maybe even. I don't know what I'm going on about now, so I'll move on. Next up is the film Under the Skin from 2013. So I think from this list, this is one people are less likely to recognise. But if you've seen the film, you'll probably know the moment I'm about to talk about. And it's when, you know, this guy has been lured back to this alien's house. The alien is, of course, played by Scarlett Johansson. And he walks down into this big pool of liquid. He gets submerged. He discovers also there's this other guy, also weirdly submerged in this liquid and floating, kind of slightly lifelessly, almost. And what happens is there's this really alarming noise. And then it's like the flesh is sucked out of this guy completely, and all that's left is his skin. And it's a pretty kind of, I remember seeing this and actually thinking, wow, I didn't see that coming. I could tell something was maybe coming, but what happened there with the sound and the noise, it took me a bit by surprise. Does it still scare me, disturb me now? Not really, to be honest, but it did at the time, I would say. And yeah, I guess the guy thought, he probably thought, wow, Scarlett Johansson. But instead, no, it's you're going to get your flesh sucked out from under you, mate. Sorry about that. So, next up, we have Requiem for a Dream. Just the whole film. I couldn't pick one moment from this, so I've just gone for the whole film, Requiem for a Dream, particularly towards the end. So I would say maybe the last moments of the film I recall as being... I haven't seen it for a while. It's not really a film I kind of wanted to repeat watch, but it immediately was one of the first films that came to mind when I was thinking of scary, disturbing things. I just thought this is, on the disturbing level, is very disturbing. And, I've heard critics say as well that it's a good anti-drug kind of an advert, I suppose. It kind of is, because it's just what happens to these people with these, like addictions is just pretty, horrifying, but it's revealed in, an alarming sort of really disturbing way, as I say. It's not a film that's easy to watch. Not one I'd recommend for a Sunday evening when you just kind of want to sit with a hot drink and just, just relax in front of something. Don't watch Requiem for a Dream if you're doing that. Next up, we have Alien. I've gone to a classic, not the scene you're thinking. I'm not going for the John Hurt scene because I knew that was coming, right? Unfortunately, I'd seen the chestburster thing before I saw Alien One, really annoyingly, because it spoils it a little bit, I guess, particularly a scene which was just as incredibly filmed as that one. Um, instead of that, I've gone for Lambert's screams over the kind of tannoy system when Ripley's, trying to sort of um, start to make her escape, I guess, but she can overhear Lambert's screams or her heavy breathing and stuff, and it's just really kind of often in horror, it's what you don't see rather than what you do see. What you don't see here is pretty terrifying, and yeah, I honestly think this when I saw this film for the first time, it wasn't the John Hurt scene that got to me. It was the Lambert and Parker bits, particularly the Lambert, her last moments. I was just like, oh no, poor woman. That's just horrible hearing that. Anyway, next up we have, for me, I mean, if this was a top 10, I've decided not to do a top 10 because I think this would be really difficult to do as a top 10. But this could possibly be number one, and it's Tina, Nightmare on Elm Street, the scene where she's Freddy's first victim, basically, I think, in that film. And, she's on the ceiling. The way they film this is really, again, it's just filmed brilliantly. The actress, just phenomenal performance with the way she just reacts to everything, obviously in the nightmare, and then where you see her on the ceiling, kind of, it's just terrifying to watch. It's awful to watch, in a way, what happens to her, and there's something real about it. That's the thing. I think there's something kind of that you're seeing. The scary thing is she's in the dream, but you're awake with her boyfriend, I think it is, and seeing what's happening to her while she's asleep. And you're just thinking to yourself, well, what if that happened to me? What if I was, being murdered in my nightmare and somebody else could see me in their waking state, panicking and sort of scrambling around, not being, in this awful state. I mean, just thinking about it to that level is what's so incredibly disturbing about the Tina scene in Nightmare on Elm Street. I'll leave you with that cheery note. So I tried to make this, a kind of slightly more different kind of video, instead of a kind of review or ranking type video, just throwing these memories at you guys, because I hope some of you out there, maybe it'll be more that you're sort of, if more my generation or older, that remember lots of these moments. Perhaps if you're younger, you may not recognise so many of these, maybe a few of them still, because they are, a lot of them are classics. But otherwise, hope you've enjoyed the video. Otherwise, from me, take care, everybody. Bye for now.